Bear cub caught in a film set wind machine and took it to hospital. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning mist hung thick over Pine Ridge Forest as the film crew set up their equipment in the clearing. Trucks lined the dirt road, their engines still warm from the early drive up the mountain. Cables snaked across the forest floor like black vines, connecting massive lights that would soon turn night into day for the cameras. Savannah Reed adjusted her headset and called out instructions to the crew. As the assistant director, she had seen her share of chaotic film sets, but something felt different about this morning. The forest was too quiet, even for dawn. Usually, birds chirped and small animals rustled through the underbrush, but today there was an eerie stillness that made her skin crawl. "Mike, can you check that wind machine again?" she called to Michael Hayes, the head of special effects. It was making that weird humming sound yesterday. Michael wiped sweat from his forehead and nodded. The industrial wind machine stood like a metal beast among the trees, its massive blades still and silent for now. He had been working with these machines for 15 years, but this particular model had been giving him trouble all week. Every time they powered it up, it seemed to have a mind of its own. Connor Adams sat in his director's chair, reviewing the morning's shots on his tablet. This was his biggest film yet, and every detail mattered. The scene they were about to shoot required perfect timing. The wind machine would create a dramatic storm effect while their lead actor delivered his emotional monologue. One mistake could ruin hours of preparation. Near the catering table, Logan Carter bounced his 6-month-old daughter Emma in his arms. As the film's location manager, he usually didn't bring his baby to set, but his wife Jessica had come down with the flu overnight. Emma gurgled happily, her bright blue eyes taking in all the strange new sights and sounds around her. "She's so good," Avery Johnson commented, walking over with a cup of coffee. As the lead actress, she'd been up since 4 in the morning getting her makeup done. Most babies would be crying with all this noise. Logan smiled proudly. Emma's always been curious about everything. Sometimes I think she understands more than we give her credit for. What none of them noticed was the small brown shape moving through the trees at the edge of the clearing. A bear cub, no more than 4 months old, had been separated from his mother during the night. The unfamiliar sounds and bright lights had drawn him closer to the film set, his natural curiosity overriding his instincts to stay hidden. The cub's name was Benny, though, of course, none of the humans knew this. His mother had been teaching him to forage for berries when a loud thunderclap had startled them both. In his panic, Benny had run the wrong direction, deeper into the forest instead of back to their den. Now, tired and hungry, he was drawn to these strange creatures who smelled different from anything he had encountered before. Savannah checked her watch. "All right, everyone, we're going live in 10 minutes. Michael, start warming up that wind machine. Logan, you might want to move Emma back a bit. It's going to get pretty loud out here." But Logan was distracted, taking a phone call from his wife. He set Emma down in her portable carrier near a stack of equipment cases, thinking she would be safe there while he handled the call. Emma kicked her little legs and made happy babbling sounds, completely unaware of the small furry face watching her from behind a nearby tree. Michael flipped the switch on the wind machine's control panel. The massive blades began to turn slowly, creating a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. "Looking good, Savannah. We'll be ready in 5. But something was wrong. The machine's pitch kept changing, rising and falling like it was struggling against some invisible resistance. Michael frowned and checked the settings again. Everything looked normal on the display, but the sound was definitely off. Benny crept closer to the clearing, fascinated by the spinning blades and the strange humming noise. He had never seen anything like this mechanical creature before. His mother had taught him to be wary of things that moved and made noise, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. He wanted to understand what this thing was and why it made such interesting sounds. Emma spotted the cub first. Her eyes widened and she let out a delighted squeal, reaching her tiny hands toward the fuzzy visitor. To her baby mind, this was just another interesting creature. Like the dogs and cats she had met at home, she didn't understand the concept of wild animals or danger. She only saw something soft and cute that she wanted to touch. The cub heard Emma's happy sounds and took another step closer. These humans didn't seem threatening like the ones his mother had warned him about. This small one especially seemed welcoming, making friendly noises and waving her arms. "Action!" Connor called out, and the wind machine roared to full power. The sudden blast of air caught Benny completely off guard. The force was unlike anything he had ever experienced, stronger than the worst storm, loud enough to hurt his ears. He tried to run back toward the trees, but the wind was too powerful. His small body was lifted off the ground and tumbled through the air like a leaf. Emma watched in fascination as her new friend flew past her carrier. To her, it looked like the most amazing game she had ever seen. She clapped her hands and laughed, not understanding that Benny was in terrible danger. The cub crashed into a tangle of cables and equipment, his small body slamming against metal cases with sickening thuds. He let out a series of high-pitched yelps. Not the deep growls people expected from bears, but the scared cries of a very young animal in pain. But the wind machine was so loud that most of the crew couldn't hear Benny's distress calls. They were focused on the scene being filmed, watching their actor deliver his lines against the artificial storm. Only Emma seemed to notice that something was terribly wrong. Michael saw warning lights flashing on his control panel, but he couldn't tell what was causing the problem. The machine was running too hot, drawing more power than it should. He started to reach for the emergency shutoff, but Connor was in the middle of what looked like a perfect take. Stopping now would mean starting over completely. Benny struggled to free himself from the cables wrapped around his small body. One of his front paws was twisted at an odd angle, and there was blood matting the fur on his head where he had hit the equipment case. Every movement sent sharp pain through his body, but panic drove him to keep trying to escape. Emma's expression changed from delight to concern. Even at 6 months old, she could recognize when someone was hurt and scared. Her babbling turned to worried whimpers as she watched Benny struggle. She began rocking back and forth in her carrier, trying to get closer to help her new friend. Logan finished his phone call and turned back toward his daughter. But the wind machine's noise was so overwhelming that he couldn't hear her distressed sounds. The artificial storm had created a wall of sound that isolated Emma and Benny from the rest of the world. That's when something extraordinary happened. Emma somehow managed to work one of her arms free from the carrier's safety straps. With a determination that seemed impossible for such a young child, she began pulling herself toward the edge of her seat. Her parents had been amazed by how advanced her motor skills were, but they had never seen her move with such focused purpose. The cub's struggles were growing weaker. The pain and fear were overwhelming his young mind, and he was starting to give up hope. That's when he heard a new sound cutting through the mechanical roar, a soft, gentle cooing that somehow reached him despite all the chaos. Emma had managed to free herself completely from the carrier. She was too young to walk, but she could crawl with surprising speed and agility. Without any fear for her own safety, she began making her way across the rough ground toward where Benny was trapped. The wind machine continued to roar, its blades spinning faster than ever. Michael's warning lights were flashing more urgently now, but he was caught between his professional obligations and his growing sense that something was going very wrong. The machine had never run this hot before, and the power readings were climbing into dangerous territory. Connor called "cut," and the artificial storm finally began to die down. As the wind machine's blades slowed and the deafening noise faded, the crew began to hear sounds they had missed during filming. Michael heard the electrical warning alarms from his equipment. Savannah heard someone's phone ringing urgently, and Logan heard something that made his blood run cold, his baby daughter's voice, but coming from the wrong direction entirely. He spun around to see Emma's empty carrier, and his heart nearly stopped. "Emma!" he screamed, scanning the cluttered film set frantically. "Where's my baby?" That's when everyone heard it. The soft cooing sounds Emma was making, mixed with the weak whimpering of a small animal in distress. The sounds were coming from behind the equipment cases where the wind machine's cables lay scattered across the ground. The entire film crew froze as they realized that something had gone terribly wrong during their perfect take. But none of them could have imagined what they were about to discover when they followed those sounds into the shadows behind the equipment. Logan's legs felt like jelly as he stumbled toward the source of Emma's voice. His mind raced with terrible possibilities. Had she crawled too close to the electrical equipment? Had something fallen on her during the wind machine sequence? The few seconds it took him to reach the equipment cases felt like hours. "Oh my God," Savannah whispered, her hand flying to her mouth as she was the first to see what lay behind the scattered cables. There was Emma, sitting cross-legged on the dirt ground with her tiny hands gently stroking the fur of a small bear cub. The cub was clearly injured. Blood trickled from a cut above his left eye, and his right front paw was bent at an unnatural angle. But instead of being aggressive or afraid, Benny was actually leaning into Emma's touch, his dark eyes fixed on her face with what could only be described as trust. "Don't move," Michael shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "Nobody move. That's a wild animal." But Emma seemed completely oblivious to any danger. She continued making soft cooing sounds, the same ones she made when her parents read her bedtime stories. Her small fingers traced gentle circles in Benny's fur, carefully avoiding his obvious injuries. The cub's breathing had steadied, and his panicked whimpering had quieted to soft, almost grateful sounds. Logan's paternal instincts screamed at him to rush forward and snatch his daughter to safety, but something held him back. He had never seen Emma this calm and focused before. She moved with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone so young, as if she instinctively understood that her new friend was hurt and needed comfort. "Where did this cub come from?" Connor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He had lived in these mountains all his life, but he had never heard of bear cubs wandering onto film sets. Avery slowly approached the scene, her actress training helping her move without sudden gestures that might startle the animals. I think the wind machine threw him into the equipment. Look at those cables. They're all tangled around where he must have landed." The realization hit the crew like a physical blow. Their equipment had seriously injured this innocent animal, and somehow Emma had found him first. But instead of the chaos they might have expected, there was an almost magical calm surrounding the unlikely pair. Dr. Janet Morrison had been the on-set medic for over 20 years, but she had never faced a situation quite like this. She crept closer with her medical bag, torn between her duty to ensure Emma's safety and her growing fascination with what she was witnessing. "The cub's in shock," she whispered to Logan. "That's probably why he's not reacting aggressively. But we need to get them both away from each other before his natural instincts kick in." Emma must have heard the adults whispering, because she turned her head toward them with a look of unmistakable concern. She pointed at Benny and made a sound that could have been hurt, one of the few words she had been trying to learn. Then she looked back at the cub and continued her gentle stroking, as if she was trying to heal him with her touch. That's when they heard it. A low, rumbling sound coming from the forest beyond the clearing. The crew's blood ran cold as they recognized the unmistakable call of an adult bear. Benny's mother had found their scent trail. "Everyone stay calm," Savannah said, though her own voice was shaking. "Janet, how long do we have before that cub's mother gets here?" "Not long, Doctor," Morrison replied grimly, "and when she sees her injured baby surrounded by humans, she's going to assume we're the threat." But Emma didn't seem concerned about the approaching danger. If anything, she appeared to be communicating with Benny in some way that the adults couldn't understand. The cub's ears perked up at his mother's call, but instead of trying to crawl toward the forest, he pressed closer to Emma, as if seeking her protection. Michael was frantically checking his wind machine controls, trying to understand what had gone wrong. "The power readings are completely off," he muttered. "It's like something was interfering with the electrical systems." Logan finally couldn't stand watching from a distance anymore. Moving as slowly and carefully as he could, he approached his daughter and the injured cub. "Emma, baby, can you come to Daddy?" Emma looked up at her father and shook her head with surprising firmness. She wrapped her small arms protectively around Benny's neck, being careful not to touch his injured paw. Her message was clear. She wasn't going anywhere without her new friend. The mother bear's calls were getting closer, and the crew could hear heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush. Connor grabbed his radio and called for backup, but he knew it would take at least 30 minutes for wildlife authorities to reach their remote location. "We have to do something," Avery said urgently. "We can't just stand here waiting for an angry mother bear to charge into our film set." Dr. Morrison opened her medical bag and pulled out a small tranquilizer gun she kept for emergencies. "This is meant for humans, but it might work on a small bear cub. If I can sedate him, we can move him to safety and get him proper medical attention." "No," Emma's voice rang out clearly, the word perfectly pronounced despite her young age. She had been listening to the adults' conversation, and somehow she understood that they wanted to hurt her friend. Her protective instincts flared as she positioned herself between Dr. Morrison and the cub. Logan's heart nearly broke watching his daughter's fierce determination to protect an animal she had just met. "Emma understands more than we think," he said softly. "She knows the cub is scared and hurt. She's trying to help him." The forest had grown quiet again, which somehow felt more ominous than the approaching footsteps had been. The mother bear was close now, probably just beyond the tree line, assessing the situation before making her move. Benny lifted his small head and made a soft chirping sound toward the forest. Not a cry for help, but something that sounded almost like reassurance. Emma responded with her own gentle cooing, and incredibly, the two seemed to be having some kind of conversation. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Morrison whispered, lowering her tranquilizer gun. "It's like they're actually communicating with each other." Savannah had been quietly radioing various wildlife experts, and now she had some potentially crucial information. "I just spoke to Dr. Sarah Chen at the State Wildlife Department. She says bear cubs this young are incredibly social and can form attachments very quickly. If this cub was separated from his mother overnight, he might be imprinting on Emma as a source of comfort." "But what about the mother?" Connor asked nervously. "She's not going to care about animal psychology when she sees humans near her baby." That's when something extraordinary happened. A massive, brown bear emerged from the tree line, standing nearly 7 feet tall on her hind legs. The crew instinctively stepped back, but Emma remained perfectly still, her arms still protectively wrapped around Benny. The mother bear's eyes locked onto her injured cub, then shifted to Emma. For a terrifying moment, everyone expected her to charge, but instead, she dropped to all fours and approached slowly, her massive head tilted to one side as if she was trying to understand this unprecedented scene. Benny made more of his soft chirping sounds, and his mother responded with gentle huffing noises. It was clear they were communicating, but what they were saying remained a mystery to the humans watching in frozen silence. Emma slowly turned her head toward the approaching mother bear, showing no fear whatsoever. She made the same cooing sound she had been using with Benny, as if she was trying to include his mother in their conversation. The massive bear stopped just a few feet away from Emma and her cub. Her intelligent eyes studied the human baby for long moments, taking in Emma's gentle touch and protective posture. Something in that ancient gaze seemed to recognize that this small human meant no harm to her baby. "Nobody move," Logan whispered urgently to the crew. I think she's trying to figure out if Emma is a threat." Dr. Morrison had her tranquilizer gun ready, but she knew that one shot wouldn't be enough to stop an angry mother bear if things went wrong. Their only hope was that this incredible connection between Emma and the cub would somehow convince the mother that they could be trusted. Emma reached out one tiny hand toward the mother bear, the same gesture she had used to comfort Benny. The massive animal could have crushed her with one swipe of her paw, but instead she lowered her enormous head and sniffed Emma's outstretched fingers. What happened next would stay with the film crew for the rest of their lives. The mother bear gently licked Emma's hand with her rough tongue, then carefully nudged Benny with her nose, encouraging him to move closer to Emma rather than away from her. "She's accepting Emma as part of their family group," Dr. Morrison breathed in amazement. "I've read about this in wildlife journals, but I never thought I'd see it happen." The moment of wonder was interrupted by a disturbing sound. Benny was starting to breathe irregularly, and his small body was trembling more violently. His injuries were clearly more serious than they had initially appeared, and he needed medical attention soon. Emma seemed to sense that something was wrong. She looked up at the adults with tears in her bright blue eyes and said another clear word: "Help." Logan's heart clenched at his daughter's distress. She had formed an instant bond with this injured animal, and now she was begging them to save his life. But how could they help a wild bear cub with his protective mother standing guard? The answer came from an unexpected source. The mother bear seemed to understand that her cub was getting worse, and she began making urgent huffing sounds while looking directly at the humans. It was as if she was asking them for help, recognizing that they might have resources she didn't. "I think she wants us to help her baby," Avery said in wonder. "She's actually asking us to help." Dr. Morrison slowly reached into her medical bag and pulled out some gauze and antiseptic wipes. "If she'll let me, I can at least clean his wounds and stabilize that paw. But we need to get him to a veterinary hospital as soon as possible." Emma clapped her hands excitedly when she saw the medical supplies, as if she understood that the adults were finally going to help her friend. She gently lifted Benny's injured paw and held it out toward Dr. Morrison, showing remarkable trust and understanding for someone so young. The mother bear watched intently as Dr. Morrison began cleaning Benny's wounds. Every few seconds, she would huff softly, and Benny would respond with his own small sounds. It was clear they were reassuring each other throughout the medical treatment. "We need to call the nearest animal hospital," Logan said, pulling out his phone. "But how are we going to transport a bear cub with his mother following us?" That question would prove to be more complicated than any of them imagined, because what they didn't know was that this was only the beginning of an incredible journey that would change all their lives forever. Logan dialed the number for Pine Ridge Animal Hospital while keeping his eyes fixed on Emma and her unlikely companions. The phone rang 3 times before a cheerful voice answered. Pine Ridge Animal Hospital. This is Rebecca speaking. How can I help you? This is going to sound crazy, Logan began, but we have an injured bear cub on our film set, and we need emergency veterinary care. The cub's mother is here too, and she seems to be cooperating with us. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'm sorry. Did you say a bear cub? Sir, we don't typically handle wild animals. You should contact the State Wildlife Department. We already tried that. They can't get here for at least 2 hours, and this cub might not have that long. Please, there's a baby involved too. My 6-month-old daughter has somehow formed a bond with this animal, and the mother bear is trusting us to help. Dr. Morrison finished cleaning Benny's wounds and carefully wrapped his injured paw in gauze. The cub had remained remarkably still during the treatment, only whimpering softly when she had to manipulate the broken bones. Emma held his other paw the entire time, whispering words that sounded like comfort, even though most of them weren't real words yet. Dr. Martinez can be there in 40 minutes, Rebecca finally said after consulting with someone in the background. But sir, I have to warn you, transporting wild animals requires special permits and equipment that we don't have readily available. We'll figure something out, Logan replied desperately. Just please get your veterinarian here as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Michael had been troubleshooting his wind machine equipment, and what he discovered made his blood run cold. Savannah, you need to see this, he called urgently. She hurried over to the control panel where Michael was pointing at a series of readings on his diagnostic screen. These power fluctuations started about 30 minutes before we turned the machine on. Something was interfering with our electrical systems, causing massive power surges. What kind of interference? Connor asked, joining them. I'm not sure, but look at this. Michael pointed to a timestamp on the screen. The interference started at exactly 6:23 a.m. What time did we first spot that cub near the clearing? Savannah checked her production notes. I made a note about unusual forest sounds at 6:25 a.m. You think the cub's presence somehow affected our equipment? I know it sounds impossible, but some animals can generate electromagnetic fields that interfere with electronic devices. It's rare, but it happens. Michael's voice carried a mixture of fascination and concern. If this cub has some kind of unusual bioelectric field, it might explain why our equipment malfunctioned so dramatically. Dr. Morrison overheard their conversation and approached with a thoughtful expression. Actually, that might explain something else I've been puzzling over. Emma's behavior today is unlike anything I've seen from a child her age. The level of empathy and communication she's displaying is extraordinary. What are you suggesting? Logan asked, still keeping one eye on his daughter and the bears. There have been documented cases of humans, especially very young children, being sensitive to electromagnetic fields generated by certain animals. If this cub has an unusual bioelectric signature, Emma might be picking up on it in ways we can't understand. Emma suddenly looked up at the adults and made a series of sounds that were clearly distressed. She pointed toward the forest and then back at Benny, her little face scrunched with worry. The mother bear's ears perked up at the same time, and she let out a low growl that had nothing to do with the humans. She was looking toward the forest with obvious concern, her massive body tensing as if preparing for a threat. What's wrong with them? Avery whispered. Their answer came in the form of crashing sounds from deep in the woods. Something large was moving through the underbrush, breaking branches and disturbing the natural rhythm of the forest. But these weren't the careful, measured steps of another bear. This sounded more chaotic and aggressive. Benny tried to lift his head toward the approaching sounds, but his injuries made movement painful. He made a series of urgent chirping noises to his mother, who responded with increasingly agitated huffs. Emma's distress was growing more obvious by the minute. She kept looking between the forest and the adults, as if she was trying to tell them something important, but didn't have the words. "I think they're trying to warn us about something," Dr. Morrison said quietly. "Both Emma and the bears are reacting to the same stimulus." The crashing sounds were getting closer, and now they could hear something else, the deep, angry roar of what sounded like a much larger bear. The mother bear immediately positioned herself between the approaching threat and her injured cub, her protective instincts overriding her previous calm behavior. "That's a male bear," Savannah said, her face pale with recognition. "I grew up in these mountains. Male bears will sometimes kill cubs that aren't their own, especially if the cubs are injured and vulnerable." Logan's parental instincts kicked into overdrive. "Emma, come to Daddy right now," he said firmly, reaching toward his daughter. But Emma shook her head stubbornly and wrapped her arms more tightly around Benny. She seemed to understand that her new friend was in danger, and she wasn't going to abandon him. Her protective instincts were as strong as any parent's, despite her young age. The male bear emerged from the tree line, and the film crew gasped collectively. He was enormous, easily twice the size of Benny's mother, with scars across his face and shoulders that spoke of many battles. His small, dark eyes swept the clearing, taking in the humans, the film equipment, and the injured cub. Benny's mother rose to her hind legs again, making herself as large and intimidating as possible. She roared a warning at the male, but he seemed unimpressed. He dropped to all fours and began circling the group, clearly looking for an opportunity to get to the vulnerable cub. "Everyone stay perfectly still," Dr. Morrison whispered. "Any sudden movement could trigger an attack." But Emma had other ideas. To everyone's horror, she slowly stood up on her unsteady legs, something she had only recently learned to do, and positioned herself directly between the approaching male bear and Benny. Her tiny frame was absurdly small compared to the massive predator, but her courage was absolute. "Emma, no!" Logan started to rush forward, but Connor grabbed his arm. "Don't," Connor whispered urgently. "You'll provoke him. Let's see what happens." What happened next defied every law of nature and common sense the adults thought they understood. Emma looked directly at the male bear and made a sound unlike anything they had heard from her before, a low, rumbling hum that seemed to come from deep in her chest. The male bear stopped mid-stride, his head tilting as if he was listening to something. Emma continued making the strange humming sound, and incredibly the massive predator sat down on his haunches like a giant, deadly dog. "What is she doing?" Avery breathed in amazement. Dr. Morrison was frantically taking notes on her phone. "I think she's mimicking some kind of bear communication that we can't hear. There might be frequencies involved that human ears can't detect." Emma's humming grew more complex, incorporating different tones and rhythms. The male bear's aggressive posture began to relax, and he actually moved closer to the small group. But instead of approaching as a predator, he seemed curious about this tiny human who could speak his language. Benny's mother watched this interaction with obvious amazement. She had never seen anything like this either, and her own protective stance began to soften as she realized that the male bear's intentions had somehow changed. Emma reached out her small hand toward the massive male bear, just as she had done with his mother. For a terrifying moment, everyone held their breath, expecting those powerful jaws to snap shut on her tiny fingers. Instead, the male bear gently sniffed Emma's hand, and then, incredibly, touched his nose to her palm in what could only be described as a greeting. "This is impossible," Michael muttered. still filming the entire encounter with his handheld camera. Bears don't behave this way with humans, especially not with children. But Emma wasn't finished with her miraculous intervention. She turned back to Benny and began making soft cooing sounds while gently stroking his fur. Then she looked up at the male bear and made more of her strange humming noises, as if she was explaining the situation to him. The massive bear actually nodded, a distinctly human gesture that left the film crew speechless. He moved closer to examine Benny's injuries, sniffing carefully at the bandaged paw and the cut on his head. "I think she's told him that the cub is hurt and needs help," Dr. Morrison said in wonder. "And I think he's agreeing to protect them instead of harming them." Logan was torn between pride in his daughter's incredible abilities and terror at the dangerous situation she had placed herself in. "Emma, baby, please come back to Daddy. You've done enough." Emma looked at her father with those wise blue eyes that seemed far too old for her young face. She shook her head again and pointed toward the forest, making urgent babbling sounds that clearly meant she wanted them to do something. "What is she trying to tell us?" Connor asked. Their answer came in the form of distant sirens. Dr. Martinez and his veterinary team were approaching, but they were still several minutes away. Emma seemed to understand that help was coming, and she was trying to organize everyone for the cub's rescue. The male bear suddenly stood up and walked to the edge of the clearing, looking back expectantly at the group. Benny's mother huffed softly and began nudging her injured cub with her nose, encouraging him to move. "I think they want us to follow them," Savannah said incredulously. "The bears are trying to lead us somewhere." Emma clapped her hands excitedly and pointed after the male bear, confirming Savannah's interpretation. She had somehow convinced two wild bears to trust humans enough to accept medical help for the injured cub. Dr. Morrison gathered her medical supplies while the rest of the crew began following the unusual procession deeper into the forest. "I have no idea where we're going or what's going to happen," she said, "but I'm documenting every second of this. No one will believe us without proof." As they walked, Emma continued making her strange humming sounds to both bears, who responded with their own vocalizations. It was like watching a three-way conversation between species that should have had no common language. "How is any of this possible?" Avery asked as they navigated through the trees. Logan shifted Emma in his arms, still amazed by everything his daughter had accomplished. "I think we're about to find out. But whatever's happening here, it's changing everything we thought we knew about communication between humans and animals." The sirens were getting closer, but the bears seemed unbothered by the approaching vehicles. If anything, they appeared to be leading the group toward a specific location where the veterinary team could work safely. What they would discover at that location would reveal secrets about the forest, the bears, and Emma's extraordinary abilities that none of them could have imagined. But first, they had to survive the most dangerous part of their journey, because something else was watching them from the shadows, and it had been following their unusual procession since they left the film set. The male bear suddenly stopped and let out a warning growl, his ears flat against his head. Benny's mother immediately moved to protect her cub, while Emma's humming took on an urgent, frightened tone. "What now?" Logan whispered, holding his daughter tighter. The answer emerged from behind a massive pine tree in the form of the largest bear any of them had ever seen. This wasn't another black bear like the others. This was something else entirely, with silver-tipped fur and eyes that gleamed with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Emma's reaction was immediate and startling. Instead of fear, her face lit up with recognition and joy. She reached toward the enormous silver bear and made a sound that was unmistakably a greeting, as if she was saying hello to an old friend. "That's not possible, Doctor," Morrison breathed. Emma's never been in these woods before. How could she know that bear? But as the massive silver bear approached their group with gentle, measured steps, it became clear that this encounter was going to change everything they thought they understood about Emma, the forest, and the mysterious connection that bound them all together. The veterinary sirens had stopped, meaning Dr. Martinez had arrived at the film set, but they were now deep in the forest with 3 wild bears and a baby who seemed to hold the key to an impossible mystery. Emma looked up at her father with those wise blue eyes and spoke a complete sentence for the first time in her life. "Home now, Daddy. Bear baby needs to go home." Logan's knees nearly gave out as he heard his daughter's clear, perfect words. Emma had been babbling for months, but this was the first time she had strung together a complete thought with such clarity and purpose. The fact that her first real sentence was about helping an injured bear cub made the moment even more extraordinary. "Did she just—" Connor started to say, but his words trailed off as the massive silver bear continued approaching their group. Dr. Morrison was frantically scribbling notes while trying to keep up with the procession. Children typically don't speak in full sentences until they're at least 18 months old. Emma is displaying cognitive abilities that are years ahead of her developmental stage. The silver bear stopped directly in front of Emma, lowering his enormous head until he was at her eye level. What happened next made everyone question everything they thought they knew about animal behavior and human development. Emma reached out and placed both of her small hands on either side of the silver bear's massive head, looking directly into his ancient eyes. For several long moments they remained perfectly still, as if they were having a silent conversation that none of the adults could hear or understand. "Grandfather Bear says the forest is crying," Emma announced, her voice carrying a solemnity that seemed impossible for someone so young. "The metal machines hurt the earth songs, and the little bears get lost when the songs are broken." Logan's head was spinning. Not only was Emma speaking in complete sentences, but she was apparently receiving complex information from a wild bear and translating it into concepts that went far beyond her usual vocabulary. "What does she mean by earth songs?" Avery whispered to Dr. Morrison. "I think she might be referring to some kind of natural electromagnetic field that animals use for navigation," Dr. Morrison replied quietly. "If our film equipment disrupted those fields, it could explain how the cub got separated from his mother and why he ended up injured on our set." The silver bear, who Emma had called Grandfather Bear, made a series of low, rumbling sounds that seemed to resonate through the ground itself. Benny's mother and the male bear both responded with respectful huffs, as if they were acknowledging some kind of authority. Emma nodded seriously as she listened to the silver bear's communication. "He says the medicine people are coming, but first we have to fix the broken song so the forest can heal." "Medicine people?" Logan asked his daughter gently. "Do you mean the veterinarian?" "Yes, Daddy, the man with the healing bag. But Grandfather Bear says there's something else that needs healing too." Emma's expression grew troubled. "The metal machines made the earth sick, and that's why baby bears get hurt." Suddenly, the implications of what Emma was saying hit the film crew like a thunderbolt. If their equipment had somehow disrupted natural electromagnetic fields that animals depended on for navigation and survival, they might be responsible for more than just one injured cub. Michael pulled out his electromagnetic detector and began taking readings around the clearing where they had set up their equipment. What he found made his face go pale. The electromagnetic readings here are completely off the charts. Our generators and lighting equipment have created a massive interference field that extends for miles into the forest. "How long has our equipment been running?" Savannah asked urgently. "We've been setting up for 3 days," Connor replied grimly. If we've been disrupting animal navigation systems for that long. The silver bear seemed to understand their growing realization. He turned and began walking deeper into the forest, clearly expecting them to follow. Emma bounced excitedly in Logan's arms and pointed after the massive bear. "Grandfather Bear wants to show us the broken places," she announced. "He says we can help fix them if we understand what we did wrong." Dr. Martinez's voice crackled through Logan's radio, interrupting their conversation. "Logan, where are you? I'm at your film set with my veterinary team, but there's no one here. I found some blood and disturbed ground behind your equipment, but no injured animal." Logan keyed his radio carefully, not wanting to startle the bears with sudden sounds. "Dr. Martinez, we're about half a mile northeast of the set. We have the injured cub with us, but the situation is complicated. Can you follow our trail?" "I'll try, but I have to warn you. I brought tranquilizer equipment because I assumed we'd be dealing with aggressive wild animals. If these bears are cooperating with you, I don't want to do anything that might change that dynamic." Emma suddenly became agitated, making distressed noises and reaching toward the radio. "No sleep medicine," she said firmly. "Bears are helping. No, make them sleep." Logan was amazed by his daughter's understanding of the conversation. She had somehow grasped that tranquilizers would be harmful to their unusual situation, even though no one had explained the concept to her. "Did you hear that, Doctor?" "Martinez. Please approach very carefully and don't use any sedatives unless absolutely necessary. These animals are displaying unprecedented cooperative behavior, and we don't want to disrupt whatever's happening here." As they continued following the silver bear through the forest, Emma kept up a steady stream of commentary that revealed increasingly complex information about their situation. The baby bear's mama was teaching him to find the berry patches using the earth songs, she explained, her small voice carrying clearly through the quiet forest. But when the metal machines started singing too loud, the earth songs got all mixed up, and Baby Bear went the wrong way. Dr. Morrison was documenting everything on her phone's voice recorder. "Emma, how do you know all of this? Can you understand what the bears are saying to you?" Emma considered the question seriously before answering. "It's not words like people use. It's like feelings and pictures that come into my head when I touch them. Grandfather Bear has lots and lots of pictures because he's very old and remembers when the forest was different." The procession stopped at a small clearing where several large trees had recently fallen, creating a natural amphitheater surrounded by towering pines. The silver bear positioned himself at the center of the clearing and began making a series of complex vocalizations that seemed to call out into the forest. Within minutes, other bears began emerging from the trees. First came a mother bear with 2 cubs, then another adult male, followed by what appeared to be an elderly female with graying fur. Soon, there were nearly a dozen bears gathered in the clearing, all sitting quietly and facing the silver bear as if attending some kind of meeting. "This is incredible," Connor whispered, still filming everything with his handheld camera. "I've never heard of bears gathering like this. It's almost like they're having a council meeting." Emma wiggled out of Logan's arms and walked confidently toward the center of the gathering. Every adult human present wanted to stop her, but something about the solemnity of the moment made them hesitate. She approached each bear in turn, placing her hands on their heads or paws and having brief, silent communications with them. With each contact, her expression grew more troubled. "Daddy," she called back to Logan, her voice carrying a sadness that broke his heart. "All the mama bears are worried about their babies. The metal machines made lots of baby bears get lost, not just Benny." The implications were staggering. Their film production had apparently caused widespread disruption to bear family groups throughout the entire region. The injured cub they had found was just one casualty of a much larger ecological disaster. Dr. Martinez's voice came through the radio again. "Logan, I'm following your trail, but I'm seeing some very unusual animal tracks. How many bears are you dealing with out there?" Before Logan could answer, Emma walked back to the group with tears streaming down her face. "Grandfather Bear says 3 baby bears are still missing. Their mamas can't find them because the earth songs are still broken." "Emma, sweetie, can you ask Grandfather Bear what we can do to help?" Logan knelt down to his daughter's level, his own eyes misting with emotion at her obvious distress. Emma placed her hand on the silver bear's massive paw and closed her eyes in concentration. The silent communication lasted for several minutes, with both Emma and the bear occasionally making soft sounds that seemed to be part of their mysterious conversation. "He says the metal machines have to stop singing their loud songs so the earth songs can come back," Emma finally announced. "And the medicine people need to help find the lost baby bears before they get too hungry and scared." Dr. Morrison approached carefully, addressing Emma as if she were an adult translator rather than a 6-month-old baby. "Emma, can you ask if there's a way to locate the missing cubs? Do the bears know where they might be?" Another lengthy, silent conversation ensued between Emma and the silver bear. When it concluded, Emma's face was bright with hope. "Grandfather Bear knows where they are. But we have to hurry because one of the baby bears is hurt like Benny, and another one is stuck in a place where humans put their trash." The urgency of the situation was becoming clear. They weren't just dealing with one injured cub anymore. They were looking at a major wildlife rescue operation that would require coordination between the film crew, veterinary teams, and possibly wildlife authorities. Savannah was already on her radio, coordinating with the base camp. "We need to shut down all electrical equipment immediately. Full power down, everything off. And get me the state wildlife department. We have a much bigger situation than we initially reported." But their rescue plans were interrupted by an unexpected complication. Dr. Martinez finally reached their location, accompanied by 2 veterinary assistants and what appeared to be a local wildlife officer. The moment the new humans entered the clearing, the gathered bears became visibly agitated. Several of the adult bears stood up and moved protectively in front of their cubs, while others began backing toward the tree line. The carefully established trust that Emma had built was being threatened by the arrival of strangers. "Everyone stop!" Emma called out with surprising authority. "The bears are scared of the new people." Dr. Martinez and his team froze at the edge of the clearing, clearly overwhelmed by the sight of so many wild bears in close proximity to humans. "Logan, what exactly is going on here? This is unlike anything I've ever seen in 30 years of veterinary practice." Emma walked purposefully toward the newcomers, her small figure cutting an unlikely path between nervous humans and agitated bears. She looked up at Dr. Martinez with those wise blue eyes and spoke with startling clarity. "You're the medicine man for animals, right? The bears need your help, but first you have to promise not to hurt them. They're trying to save their lost babies, and we have to help them." Dr. Martinez knelt down to Emma's level, his professional demeanor giving way to wonder at this extraordinary child. "I promise we're here to help, sweetheart. Can you tell the bears that we want to help them find their missing babies?" Emma nodded solemnly and returned to the silver bear, beginning another of her mysterious, silent communications. This time, the conversation seemed more urgent, with both Emma and Grandfather Bear making more frequent vocalizations. The other bears watched this exchange intently, as if waiting for instruction from their leader. After several tense minutes, the silver bear made a decisive huffing sound that seemed to settle the group. "Grandfather Bear says the medicine people can help, but only if they follow the bear rules, Emma announced. No loud noises, no fast movements, and no sleep medicine unless a baby bear is really, really hurt. Dr. Martinez nodded respectfully toward the silver bear. We accept those conditions. Now, can you help us understand what kind of medical attention the injured cubs need? What followed was the most unusual veterinary consultation in recorded history. Emma served as translator between the bears and the medical team, relaying detailed information about injuries, symptoms, and locations that should have been impossible for her to understand or communicate. Benny has a broken bone in his front paw and a cut on his head that might need stitches, Emma reported after consulting with the cub's mother. The second lost baby has a hurt back leg and can't walk very far. The third baby isn't hurt, but he's trapped in a place with lots of metal cans and plastic things, and he's very scared. Dr. Morrison was frantically taking notes while Dr. Martinez began organizing his medical supplies. Emma, this information is incredibly detailed. How are you able to understand such complex medical concepts? Emma looked at Dr. Morrison with an expression that seemed far too mature for her young face. When I touch the bears, I can feel what they feel. If something hurts them, it hurts me too. If they're scared, I get scared. It's like we're all connected by invisible strings. The wildlife officer, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. I need to report this situation to my superiors. We're looking at a potential environmental disaster if film equipment has disrupted animal navigation over a wide area. There could be legal implications. But Emma's attention had shifted back to Benny, who was showing signs of increasing distress. His breathing had become more labored, and his injured paw was swelling despite Dr. Morrison's initial treatment. Benny needs the medicine man right now, Emma said urgently. His hurt is getting bigger inside. Dr. Martinez immediately moved to examine the injured cub, but Benny's mother remained protectively close, watching every movement with obvious concern. Emma positioned herself between the veterinarian and the mother bear, serving as a bridge of trust between species. It's okay, Mama Bear, Emma said soothingly, though it was unclear whether she was speaking to the bear or to the humans. The medicine man has gentle hands like mine. As Dr. Martinez began his examination, he discovered that Benny's injuries were more serious than initially apparent. This cub has internal bleeding and possible organ damage from the impact. We need to get him to the animal hospital immediately, or he might not survive. The news hit Emma like a physical blow. She began crying with an intensity that seemed to resonate through the entire gathering of bears. Several of the adult bears moved closer, as if trying to comfort her, while Benny's mother made soft huffing sounds that were clearly meant to be reassuring. "We have to save him," Emma sobbed. "He's just a baby, and it's our fault he got hurt." Logan scooped up his daughter, his own eyes filling with tears at her distress. "We're going to do everything we can, sweetheart. Dr. Martinez is a very good doctor for animals." But transporting an injured bear cub to a veterinary hospital while maintaining the trust of his mother and an entire gathering of wild bears presented logistical challenges that no one had ever faced before. "How do we move him without breaking up this, whatever this is?" Dr. Martinez asked, gesturing toward the remarkable interspecies gathering. Emma wiped her tears and looked up at her father with determination. "Mama Bear has to come with us, and Grandfather Bear too. They won't let Benny go to the medicine place without them." The idea of transporting multiple wild bears to a veterinary hospital seemed impossible. But as Emma began another silent communication with the silver bear, it became clear that the bears had their own plan for solving this problem. Grandfather Bear stood up and began walking toward the edge of the clearing, clearly expecting everyone to follow. The other bears fell into formation behind him, with Benny's mother carefully picking up her injured cub in her mouth. "Where are they going?" Connor asked, still filming the unprecedented procession. Emma clapped her hands excitedly despite her tears. "Grandfather Bear knows a secret way. There's a place where the medicine people can help Benny, and all the bears can be safe too." As the unusual parade began moving deeper into the forest, none of them could have imagined that they were being led toward a discovery that would change everything they thought they knew about the relationship between humans and wildlife, the true nature of Emma's abilities, and the ancient secrets hidden in the heart of Pine Ridge Forest. The veterinary radio crackled to life as they walked. "Dr. Martinez, this is Base Hospital. We're getting reports of unusual animal behavior throughout the entire mountain region. Multiple bear sightings, disrupted migration patterns, and several injured wildlife reports. What's your status out there?" Dr. Martinez looked around at their extraordinary situation and keyed his radio. "Base, you're not going to believe this, but I think we've stumbled onto something much bigger than a simple animal injury. I'm going to need backup, and I'm going to need you to prepare for the most unusual case we've ever handled." As they followed the bears deeper into the wilderness, Emma continued to serve as translator and mediator, but her communications were becoming more complex and mysterious. She began speaking about things that seemed impossible for a 6-month-old to understand: ancient connections between humans and animals, the healing power of trust, and something she called the old promises that had been forgotten by both species. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows through the forest canopy when they finally reached their destination. What they found there would test everything they believed about the natural world and reveal the true purpose behind Emma's extraordinary gift. The clearing they entered was unlike anything the film crew had ever seen. It was perfectly circular, surrounded by ancient pine trees that seemed to tower impossibly high into the darkening sky. In the center of the clearing stood what appeared to be the ruins of an old stone structure. Not built by modern humans, but something far older and more mysterious. "What is this place?" Dr. Martinez whispered, his veterinary equipment suddenly feeling insignificant in the presence of something so ancient and sacred. Emma slipped out of Logan's arms and walked confidently toward the stone ruins, her small footsteps echoing strangely in the quiet clearing. "This is the Healing Circle," she announced, her voice carrying with unusual clarity. Emma slipped out of Logan's arms and walked confidently toward the stone ruins, her small footsteps echoing strangely in the quiet clearing. "This is the Healing Circle," she announced, her voice carrying with unusual clarity. "Grandfather Bear says this is where the first promises were made between people and animals, back when the world was young." The bears arranged themselves in a perfect circle around the stone structure, with Grandfather Bear taking a position at what appeared to be the eastern edge of the formation. Benny's mother gently placed her injured cub in the center of the circle, on a flat stone that seemed to have been worn smooth by countless years of use. Dr. Morrison was frantically photographing everything while taking notes. "Logan, this looks like some kind of ancient ceremonial site. These stone arrangements are similar to indigenous healing circles I've read about, but this one appears to be specifically designed for animal ceremonies." As if responding to her words, Emma walked over to Dr. Morrison and took her hand. "The stone people and the tree people and the animal people used to work together to keep everyone healthy and safe," she explained with the patient tone of someone much older. "But then the new people came and forgot how to listen to the old songs." Connor was still filming, but his hands were shaking as he tried to capture the surreal scene. "Emma, how do you know about this place? You've never been here before." Emma smiled at him with those wise blue eyes. "I remember it from the dream place. When I touch the bears, I can see their memories, and their grandparents' memories, and their grandparents' grandparents' memories. This place is in all their memories, going back to the very beginning. Suddenly, Benny made a weak crying sound that cut through the mystical atmosphere like a knife. His breathing was becoming more labored, and his small body was trembling with pain and exhaustion. "We need to work fast, Doctor," Martinez said urgently, moving toward the center of the circle with his medical bag. "This cub is going into shock." But as he approached the stone altar where Benny lay, something extraordinary began to happen. The flat stone began to emit a soft, pulsing glow that seemed to come from within the rock itself. The light wasn't harsh like electric illumination. It was warm and gentle, like moonlight filtered through water. "What in the world?" Dr. Martinez stopped mid-step, staring at the glowing stone in disbelief. Emma walked calmly to his side and took his hand. "It's okay, medicine man. The stone is just waking up to help with the healing. It knows you have gentle hands and a good heart." As if her words had given him permission, Dr. Martinez slowly approached the glowing altar. To his amazement, the light seemed to make his examination of Benny's injuries easier and more precise. He could see details that should have been impossible to detect without proper medical equipment. "This is incredible," he murmured as he began cleaning and treating Benny's wounds. "It's like the light is showing me exactly what needs to be done." Meanwhile, Savannah had been trying to radio back to base camp, but her equipment was malfunctioning. "I'm getting massive electromagnetic interference," she reported to the group. "But it's not chaotic like before. It's organized, almost like a pattern." Emma nodded sagely. "The healing circle is singing its old songs to help Benny get better. Sometimes the old songs and the new machine songs don't like each other very much." Logan watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. "Emma, sweetheart, where did you learn about healing circles and old songs? These aren't things we've taught you." "I learned them from touching Grandfather Bear," Emma replied simply. "He carries all the old knowledge in his heart. He's been waiting a long time for someone who could hear the old songs again." As Dr. Martinez worked on Benny's injuries under the mysterious light, the other bears in the circle began to hum, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to harmonize with some inaudible frequency. Emma joined in with her own humming, and incredibly the injured cub's breathing began to stabilize. "His vital signs are improving," Dr. Martinez reported in amazement. "I've never seen anything like this. It's as if the healing process is being accelerated by some external force." But their moment of hope was interrupted by a commotion at the edge of the clearing. 3 park rangers had arrived, led by Chief Ranger Patricia Hayes, and they were clearly prepared for a dangerous wildlife encounter. They carried tranquilizer rifles and other equipment designed to handle aggressive animals. "Everyone, step away from the bears immediately," Chief Hayes commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We have reports of unusual bear behavior throughout the region, and we're here to contain the situation." The moment the rangers entered the clearing, the mystical atmosphere changed dramatically. The glowing stone dimmed, the bears stopped their harmonious humming, and several of the adult bears began to show signs of agitation. Emma immediately ran to position herself between the rangers and the healing circle. "No!" she cried out with surprising force. "You're breaking the healing. The bears are helping, not hurting." Chief Hayes stared at the small child in disbelief. "Ma'am, you need to get that baby away from those dangerous animals immediately. We have authority to tranquilize any wildlife that poses a threat to human safety." "They're not dangerous," Emma protested, tears streaming down her face. "They're trying to save baby Benny, and you're scaring them with your loud voices and scary smells." Logan quickly moved to support his daughter while trying to defuse the situation. "Chief Hayes, I understand your concerns, but you need to know that these bears have been cooperating with us. They're actually helping us rescue injured cubs." "That's impossible," one of the other rangers scoffed. "Wild bears don't cooperate with humans, especially not when they have cubs to protect." But as if to prove him wrong, Grandfather Bear slowly rose from his position in the circle and approached the group of rangers. His massive size should have been intimidating, but his movements were calm and deliberate, showing no signs of aggression. Emma walked confidently beside the enormous silver bear, her small hand resting on his thick fur. "Grandfather Bear wants to show you something," she announced. "He says you have forgotten the old agreements, but he remembers." What happened next left everyone speechless. Grandfather Bear opened his massive jaws and gently picked up a small object from the ground. A park ranger's badge that had apparently fallen from one of their uniforms. Instead of destroying it, he carefully placed it at Chief Hayes's feet and then backed away respectfully. "That's my grandfather's badge," Chief Hayes whispered, her face going pale. "It's been missing from our family collection for over 20 years. How did this bear—" Emma looked up at the Chief Ranger with compassion in her young eyes. "Grandfather Bear says your people's grandfather was a friend to the forest. He made promises to protect both the animals and the people, but the new people forgot the promises. Grandfather Bear has been keeping the badge safe, waiting for someone from your family to come back and remember." The implications of what Emma was saying hit Chief Hayes like a physical blow. Her grandfather had been a legendary ranger in these mountains, known for his unusual ability to work peacefully with wildlife. Family stories told of his mysterious connection to the forest animals, but she had always assumed they were just folklore. "How could this child possibly know about my grandfather?" Chief Hayes asked Dr. Morrison quietly. "We're still trying to understand Emma's abilities," Dr. Morrison replied, "but she seems to have access to memories and information that should be impossible for her to know." Meanwhile, Dr. Martinez had finished his treatment of Benny under the continuing glow of the healing stone. "I've done everything I can with the medical supplies I have," he reported. "But this cub still needs surgery to repair internal damage. We have to get him to a proper veterinary hospital." Emma immediately returned to the healing circle and placed her hands on Benny's small head. After a moment of silent communication, she looked up with tears in her eyes. "Benny says he's not afraid of the medicine place anymore because he knows the medicine people have good hearts," she announced. "But Mama Bear is still scared. She doesn't want to leave the healing circle because she thinks the new people will hurt her baby." Chief Hayes slowly approached the circle, her entire demeanor changed by the revelation about her grandfather's badge. "Emma, can you ask Mama Bear what it would take for her to trust us to help her cub?" Another silent conversation ensued between Emma and the mother bear. When it concluded, Emma's expression was thoughtful and sad. "Mama Bear says she will trust the medicine people if someone from the promise-keeping family comes with them to the medicine place," Emma reported. She remembers the stories her grandmother told about rangers who kept their word to protect both animals and people. Chief Hayes felt the weight of family legacy settling on her shoulders. "Emma, tell Mama Bear that I am from the promise-keeping family, and I give my word that her baby will be safe." As if understanding the solemnity of the moment, Chief Hayes knelt down and placed her hand on the ancient stone altar. "I, Patricia Hayes, granddaughter of Ranger Thomas Hayes, renew the old promises between my people and the forest people. We will protect and serve all creatures who call these mountains home." The effect of her words was immediate and powerful. The healing stone's glow intensified. The bear's humming resumed. and even the other rangers seemed to feel the significance of what had just occurred. But their moment of unity was shattered by an urgent radio transmission from the base hospital. "Dr. Martinez, we have a crisis situation. 3 more injured bear cubs have been brought in by hikers, and we're getting reports of at least 6 other cubs that are still missing. Whatever disrupted the wildlife in your area has affected the entire mountain ecosystem." Emma's face crumpled with distress as she absorbed this information. "The earth songs are still broken," she sobbed. "More baby bears are lost and hurt because the metal machines sang too loud and made the mothers forget which way to find their children." Grandfather Bear made a series of urgent huffing sounds while looking directly at the film crew members. Emma listened intently before translating his message. "Grandfather Bear says the metal machines have to be turned off completely, not just turned down. The earth songs can't heal while the machine songs are still playing, and he says there's something else, something bad that's been sleeping in the deep forest, and the broken earth songs are starting to wake it up." "What kind of something bad?" Connor asked, his camera still rolling despite the growing tension. Emma's communication with Grandfather Bear became more agitated, with both of them making increasingly urgent sounds. When the conversation ended, Emma's face was filled with fear. "Grandfather Bear says there's an old angry bear who lives in the deepest part of the forest. He's much bigger than Grandfather Bear, and he's been sleeping for many years because the earth songs kept him calm. But now that the songs are broken, he's starting to wake up, and when he wakes up all the way, he'll be very, very angry at all the people." Dr. Morrison felt a chill run down her spine. "Emma, are you talking about some kind of territorial alpha male?" "No," Emma shook her head seriously. "Grandfather Bear calls him the Shadow Bear. He says Shadow Bear is older than the trees, older than the stones, older than the promises. He's been sleeping because that was part of the very first agreement between people and animals. But if the earth songs stay broken, Shadow Bear will wake up and forget about the agreements." The rangers exchanged worried glances. Chief Hayes had heard whispers of legends about a massive bear that supposedly roamed the deepest wilderness areas, but she had always dismissed them as campfire stories. "How big are we talking about?" she asked Emma seriously. Emma spread her arms as wide as she could and still couldn't encompass the size she was trying to convey. "Bigger than our house. Bigger than the big trucks. Grandfather Bear says when Shadow Bear stands up, his head touches the clouds." Logan was beginning to understand that they were dealing with something far beyond a simple wildlife rescue. "Emma, what happens if Shadow Bear wakes up completely?" Emma's communication with Grandfather Bear was brief but intense. When she translated the answer, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Grandfather Bear says Shadow Bear will try to drive all the people away from the forest forever. He'll hurt the ones who made the earth songs broken, and he'll make the forest a place where people can never come again." The implications were staggering. If Emma was right, their film production had not only injured individual animals but had potentially awakened some kind of ancient threat that could endanger human access to the entire mountain region. Michael, who had been quietly taking electromagnetic readings throughout their conversation, suddenly spoke up with alarm in his voice. "I'm detecting massive energy fluctuations coming from the north. Whatever's out there, it's generating an electromagnetic field that's off the charts." As if summoned by his words, a deep, earth-shaking roar echoed through the forest from somewhere far to the north. It was unlike any sound any of them had ever heard, deeper than thunder, more powerful than any animal call they could imagine. Every bear in the healing circle immediately went into high alert, their ears flat against their heads and their eyes focused on the northern forest. Grandfather Bear made a series of urgent huffs to the other bears and they began to scatter toward the edges of the clearing.